What is up, YouTube? It's Andromeda, and we are back with another episode of reaction videos. And today we're gonna react to the big mystery of Roanoke Colony. I'm sure some of you may have heard how this colony was set up in the island of Roanoke, and once the captain came back, which was John White, it was all missing, like literally, like he just disappeared, like the people just vanished and we don't know whatever happened to them. And some claim they were killed off by the native, some claim they actually traveled to Croatoan based on the word being carved into a tree stump. So I mean, who knows really. So I mean, hopefully this video can provide more insight into this mystery. And please remember to comment, like, subscribe, help the channel grow, and let's get on with the video.
Before we can tackle the lost colony, we first need to understand the events leading up to its disappearance. The story begins in 1584 when two ships sailed across the Atlantic to scout for a suitable location for the planting of the first
look how much I had to travel
English
back then,
colony
man.
in America.
And like a
mid-July,
long
they made
road
landfall
too.
on a string of barrier islands known as the Outer Banks.
I mean, there must be
The
some
English
reason why they
quickly
couldn't just go
developed
straight,
friendly
the
relations with the
Atlantic.
local Native Americans and were soon invited to their village on Roanoke Island.
Alright.
After about a month, the scouting expedition returned to their ships and sailed back to England.
So they just left him and
Upon the
went back to
expedition's
England?
return in late September, the man in charge of the enterprise, Walter Raleigh, immediately began preparations to plant a permanent colony somewhere along the Outer Banks.
Okay, so they were just on the land, but I mean they didn't have an established civilization yet, obviously.
In April of 1585, a fleet of 7 ships departed England with a complement of roughly 600 men and loaded with enough provisions to sustain the colony for about a year. About 100 men, far fewer than initially intended, were stationed on Roanoke Island, and with the natives' approval, they began construction of what was to become the Roanoke colony.
That was the first mistake of the Native Americans. Never should have let anybody enter the land.
It provided quick access to the ocean while still making the colony invisible to Spanish patrols.
Oh, so they were hiding from the
Spain had already
Spanish.
colonized and laid claim to much of what the English now called Virginia, so they had to be careful not to attract any unwanted attention. A second wave of supplies and reinforcements was expected to arrive before the winter, but unbeknownst to the colonists, the resupply mission had been countermanded by the Queen to deal with more pressing concerns back in England.
Wow, man, the Queen really did them dirty.
Once the colonists ran out of food, they had to rely on the
natives,
generosity of the natives.
Yep.
However, the natives only had so much to spare and struggled to meet increasing demands.
That's so interesting how like their civilization was so close to each other like that.
Began to strain their
Interesting.
Meanwhile,
I wish I could go back in time,
a disturbing trend.
And this is
Every
the best I
time
can
the
do.
English visited a Native American village, many of its inhabitants would inexplicably collapse and die. The natives believed the English could kill from a distance by shooting invisible bullets, and they were not too far off. While unknown at the time, the English were carrying deadly pathogens to which the natives lacked immunity, and thus
the natives got
epidemic
destroyed
was
once the
unwittingly
English came
unleashed
through.
upon the indigenous population.
Jesus Christ.
The two leaders back on Roanoke, colonial governor Ralph Lane and Indian chieftain Wingina, eventually grew so suspicious of one another that cohabitation was no longer possible. Wingina decided to remove his people from the island and retreated to a larger village on the mainland. Meanwhile, Lane came to believe that Wingina had formed an alliance with other tribes and that they were plotting to launch an attack against the colony. Whether he was paranoid or not,
They were so
Lane decided
paranoid
to take
probably.
preemptive
I don't know, I
action.
mean, I wasn't there at the time.
On the 1st of June, 1586, Lane and his men made their way to the mainland village and massacred its people.
Jesus
One
Christ.
of the Englishmen chased after and decapitated Wingina, and his head was later impaled outside.
Wow,
the
man,
fort
everything
of
was
the
so
colony.
brutal back then. I'm lucky to be alive during these times,
A week later,
that society is
a
already
large
established.
English fleet commands were hastily evacuated off the island, and then after 9 long months, they all returned home.
Bruh.
All except 3, who were not located in time for the evacuation.
Wow,
and
they
so
got
the fleet
left.
left them behind. They were never heard from again.
Jesus, that's scary.
If
That's
the
like
scouting
the worst
expedition
thing
of
that can happen to
1584 had been a
anybody.
resounding success, the
You're just
colony of
out alone in a new
1585 was a
land
categorical
with just like 2
failure.
other people.
Relations with the Native Americans had completely fallen apart. The severe lack of food had made life miserable, and they had failed to track down rumored sources of gold and copper, which could have made the venture worthwhile. In spite of all this, at least one man was eager to return. His name was John White. White
White.
was a painter and artist
Everybody
by
had like
trade,
such an
and many of the
English
maps
name,
and
like you just
sketches
tell
that
him.
we've seen so
I mean,
far
obviously.
were either drawn by him or based on his work.
Hmm.
Somewhat ironically, however, there are no surviving portraits of White himself. White's
Interesting.
participation in these earlier voyages is slightly ambiguous. He may have been part of the scouting expedition in 1584, but he was definitely part of the voyage in 85. What is a bit unclear is whether he stayed behind at the colony or returned to England with the outbound fleet. For instance, White's name is not included in a surviving list of all the colonists.
Wow,
But some
we still have
historians
this list till
believe this is
today.
mainly an
Wow.
oversight and that he was in fact part of the colony. In either case, Sir Walter Raleigh was eventually persuaded by White and others to attempt a second venture. Unlike the first colony, which had been more akin to a military outpost, the second would include women and children.
So the second
including
was
White's
even
pregnant
more
daughter,
important, you know,
Eleanor
because
Dare.
this
After a long
this
struggle
colony
to
was
secure the
really about to
necessary
establish
funding,
their own
a fleet of
society in the
3
new
ships
land.
commanded by White, who would also serve as the governor of the colony, departed
Alright.
England in late spring of
Yeah, I'm
1587.
still in shock how long, they took the long route. They just, for some important reason, like I said, they just couldn't go straight to the
The
Atlantic.
misfortune of the first colony did not end with its evacuation in 1586. Only days later, a ship filled with provisions sent by Sir Walter Raleigh arrived at the Outer Banks. The crew spent some time searching for the colonists, but when they found no sign of them, including the 3 men that had been left behind, they returned home.
Okay.
The same thing happened 2 weeks later when an English-bound fleet loaded with supplies and reinforcements also found the colony deserted. Unwilling to leave the colony vacant, however, the captain left 15 crewmen on Roanoke before the
Good
fleet
luck.
was on course for England.
Bro,
John White had been told about the 15
man.
crewmen before he departed, so when his fleet approached the
Whoever
Outer
was
Banks
down to
in
go
late
to the New
July
World
of
really had some balls
1587,
on them,
he
'cause
intended
wow.
to pay them a visit. 15 crewmen they had come to assist.
Bro,
Instead,
everybody's
they
disappearing
found a
in
pile of bones that
Roanoke.
appeared to be the remains of one of them.
Why keep
White
sending
suspected
people
the men
over
had been
there?
attacked by vengeful Indians, and any doubts he might have had were soon to be raised.
They thought it was a
After
native.
only a few days on the island, a colonist by the name of George Howe was
Ah.
attacked by a group of natives who pelted him with 16
Jesus,
arrows
16
before caving in his
arrows.
skull with a wooden club. A brutal yet unmistakable message. The English were no longer
I
welcome.
mean,
on
I don't
Roanoke.
blame them.
Even so, the colonists were not without allies. You see, when the scouting expedition returned to England in 1584, 2 Native Americans named Wanchese and Manteo were brought along with them. Wanchese was from Roanoke, while Manteo was from a neighboring village on the island of Croatoan.
So why did they
When were
volunteer, or
finally
did they
brought
even
back to
volunteer
North
to go with
America
them?
in 1585, they had developed vastly different opinions.
Maybe they
of
were,
the
they
English
wanted
people.
something new in
As
life.
soon as they made landfall,
wanted to
Wanchese
see
returned to
how was
Roanoke
the
with
other side of the
nothing
world
but
was like.
resentment for these
Good
foreign
opportunity.
invaders. Meanwhile, Manteo was fascinated by everything the English had to offer.
Ah, see, look,
He became
like
their
I said.
trusted guide and a mediator of sorts to smooth out relations upon first contact. So, following the death of George
At least there
Howe,
was some,
White reached
helpful
out
people
to the
back then.
Croatoans, and they confirmed what he'd initially suspected. A large group of Indian tribes had indeed attacked the 15 crewmen stationed on Roanoke. This
Oh.
coalition was spearheaded by none other than Wanchese. At least 2 of the crewmen had been killed in the attack, while the rest escaped in a small boat, never to be seen again. Roanoke had become a much more dangerous place to
So why keep going back to it? Ah,
Simão Fernandes
John White does
remained
not
anchored
learn.
near the Outer Banks for about a month before he decided to return to England. In the meantime, the colonists had grown concerned about the long-term survival of the colony. If the colony were to be truly self-sufficient, they argued, they would require more people and more food. As such, they implored Governor White to return to England with Fernandes so that he could bring back supplies and restock the colony. White was initially hesitant to leave as he feared he'd be accused of desertion if he returned to England alone. Not to mention he would have to abandon his daughter, who had recently given birth to a daughter of her own, named Virginia, on this remote and precarious island. But in time, he was
Wow.
persuaded to go, and as the fleet
buy his daughter
departed
with
in late
him.
August of 1587, he could not have known he would never see any of them again.
Bro, I mean, like, White's dumb. Like I said, like, you see all these red flags happening in this island, all this conflict. Obviously, the Navy doesn't want any English to be on the island, and he still sends
After a long
his
and
own
difficult voyage,
family along with
John
other
White
families on
returned
the
to a
island. Like,
country
come on,
at
man.
war. By orders of the Queen, no ships were
Go
to
with the
leave
Chesapeake
England until
Bay
the threat of a Spanish
plan
invasion
they had in.
passed.
Stop listening to
This was bad news
Fernandez.
for White, and his best efforts notwithstanding, he remained trapped in England for 3 long years. It was not until they came across a second inscription. It was the word Croatoan engraved into a wooden post.
That's so
The
weird.
post was but one of many that now formed a defensive barrier around the
I'm
colony.
assuming that's John White
The
pointing to
colony
it.
itself
I mean, there
was
wasn't any
deserted,
approaches
and
there.
clearly had been for some time, given
Not
the
him.
overgrowth of grass and weeds. The houses had been taken down and stripped of valuables.
But there was a
All
fire.
they found were bars of iron, a few cannons, as well as 5 looted chests. There was no trace of the roughly 115 colonists, nor the small boats left in their possession.
So they
As far
left.
as anyone could tell, no one had lived here for quite some time.
Bro, that's so creepy.
The story of the lost colony is often centered
I mean, I would have
around the
considered they
two
left.
engravings, and without the full context,
I
it's
don't know
easy
what
to see how
Croatoan
an
stands for,
author
but I
might
mean, if
imbue
that's like
these
a near island they
inscriptions
probably
with
went to.
intrigue and mystery. In truth, the carvings
And
are
what's up
some
with
of
the
the
fire?
more well-understood elements of the entire story. At least John White had no doubts about their meaning. Island of Croatoan.
Also, it wasn't island.
White swiftly returned
I mean,
to the
I would have
ship
gone
and
after
convinced
that.
the captain to set course for Croatoan.
Yep.
But while the crew prepared for departure, the anchor cable snapped. And without the spare anchor, the captain felt it was too dangerous to continue.
Jesus,
In the end,
man.
White never made it
This
to
is
Croatoan.
setback after
and it was the
setback.
last
That
time
this is
he
why this
ever ventured
mystery
across
never
the
even
Atlantic.
got solved. So I just headed back. I mean, like knowing his daughter's missing.
While
That
an
must be tough.
unsatisfying conclusion, it seems relatively safe to assume the lost colony of Roanoke simply relocated to the island of Croatoan. Case closed? Well, not quite. You
What's
see,
up?
while
Why not?
explaining the meaning of the inscriptions, White revealed another interesting yet puzzling detail. With a single sentence, White explains that before he left in 1587, the colonists were preparing to move 50 miles into the mainland. While Croatoan
Okay.
is about 50 miles south of Roanoke, it's also an island, distinctly not part of the mainland.
Mhm.
As such, this lone sentence introduces, if but a modicum of doubt, to White's version of events.
I mean, why was
Perhaps
just
Croatoan
estimating
was
at this
not their
point?
intended destination after all. If so, where could they have gone?
I mean, I'm assuming they went somewhere. I mean, they went to Croatoan, obviously, like White
20
said.
years after the Roanoke
But,
colony was lost,
I mean,
the
people still
Anglo-Spanish
doubting
War
they
had
actually
come
got
to an
there.
end.
I mean,
John
maybe
White
they didn't even
faded
get
into
there.
obscurity,
Maybe they
and
just
Sir
died
Walter
along the way,
Raleigh
like
had been found guilty of
you know, because there
treason
were
for
so much natives in the
conspiring against
islands.
the crown. Yeah, I know, it's a whole other thing. Anyway, renewed interest in America saw the plantation of a third colony in 1607. The Jamestown colony was established within the borders of a vast confederacy of Native American tribes ruled by a man the English called Powhatan. One day, Powhatan captured the future governor of the colony, John Smith,
Wow,
and told him about the
he's a
place
boss.
where men wearing European clothing lived.
Oh.
Then, after his release in 1608, Smith drew a rough map of Virginia, and this is one of the notations.
Here is 4 man clothes that came from
Unfortunately,
Roanoke.
this claim and
Roanoke.
others just like it were never properly investigated, so we can
That's
never
so
know if this
interesting.
was anything
Maybe
more than a rumor. Another unconfirmed report was that all but a few of
But
the
why was the
colonists had
purpose of
been
the rumor then?
massacred by Powhatan. The survivors of this slaughter at Roanoke had then supposedly scattered across the region. The problem is, White did not report any human remains or signs of a battle
mean,
when he returned to
did
Roanoke
they eat the
in 1590.
bodies?
Even
Buried
so,
them?
an acquaintance of John Smith later wrote that Powhatan had confessed to the massacre after Smith was captured. Smith himself, however, makes no mention of this alleged confession, and he was not exactly known to shy away from embellishment. Pocahontas. Other
Okay.
reports
Oh,
included
this is so
sightings of Native
weird.
American children with
All
unusually
these
pale
rumors
skin
and
and
whatnot.
blonde hair, which led many to suspect they could be the descendants of the lost colonists. What they had no way of knowing at the time, however, was that albinism is far more prevalent among Native Americans than Europeans.
I did not know
A
that.
more solid lead emerged a full century later when the
gonna
English
have to search that
explorer
up
John
on Google, like,
Lawson made contact
Maybe there's some
with a
records
tribe
on
known as
those
the
type of
Hatteras.
people.
The carvings, John Lawson says they went to Croatoan because grey ice and
Grace
ghosts.
and ghosts.
Not the most
Nah,
decisive
I
evidence,
just can't
perhaps,
believe
but
this
it does
dude.
make for a compelling
This is more
argument.
conspiracy than John White. I mean, John White seems more
Following
reliable,
Lawson's
but I mean,
encounter
this,
with the Hatteras in 1701,
nonetheless, there's no
nothing
proof
of
of any,
significance would be
except the tree
uncovered
stuff with
for
the forged
centuries.
crow.
That is until the late 1930s, when a series of peculiar stones suddenly brought the mystery back to life.
Well,
The
what the
stones
stones
had been
have.
inscribed with messages supposedly written by Eleanor Dare, the daughter of John White.
Oh.
Unfortunately, they all turned out to be fake.
What? Come on,
Well,
man.
all
Why do people
except
do this
the
type of dumb
first
shit?
stone, whose authenticity remains in doubt. This stone features a message from Dare addressed to White in which he describes the tragic death of her husband and child. The composition of the stone makes it well suited for inscribing a message, but a poor choice for a forger, as they would have had to chemically age the fresh markings to match the weathered surface. It would not have been impossible, but quite difficult to do so in the 1930s. On the other hand, the man who supposedly found the stone was never heard from again, and the precise location of its discovery was conveniently kept secret. The credibility of the writing is equally contested, and there's just no consensus.
So the stone's out. I mean, it could either be real fake, but I mean, it's more leaning to fake at this point.
Plagued by uncertainties. Excavations at Roanoke have mostly confirmed patches carefully examined.
Thank
Underneath
God.
the lower patch, they found exactly what you'd expect: minor corrections. Underneath the upper patch, however, they found this.
Yo, that must have been mind blowing, just like finding
star
that
is a typical
star.
representation of a fort. A comparable symbol can be seen on this map from the early
Wonder why
17th century.
was that really a
The
mistake?
paint used to draw the symbol matches the paint used
Or he's trying to cover some
on the
things
map,
up. Who
including the
knows?
corrections drawn on top of the lower patch.
May be worth a visit
suggesting it was
at the
drawn
time.
and concealed
If
by
they actually did
White
find
himself.
why that patch was
More
even,
puzzling
you know,
still, a
patched.
slightly smaller four-pointed star enclosed by two concentric squares has been painted with invisible ink on top of the patch. This symbol can even be faintly discerned with the naked eye, meaning it's been hiding in plain sight all along.
Yeah, but you have to see like
Finally,
really
this fort
hard
is
on that
situated
paper.
on the mainland, approximately 50 miles west of Roanoke.
Okay. Damn, John White could have done so much at the time, but you know, his dumb anchor didn't want to work, and we could have, you know, gotten more info about this now.
Fort
It's
was
gonna be so hard to figure out what happened.
in reference to the expression X marks the spot.
Part.
While the fort itself has yet to be found, presuming it was ever built, archaeological digs have uncovered a few items of interest. Fragments of pottery and bits of metal are indicative of an English presence, but much like the findings on Hatteras, an indisputable link to the lost colony has yet to be established.
I always wanted to be
That
one of
being
those
said, the research
archaeologists.
is still ongoing, and
Sorry
the
if I
smoking
butchered
gun,
that, but I
whatever
mean,
it may be,
they find so
will perhaps
much
have
great
been found
stuff
by the
out
time you're
there.
watching
Like,
this. Presuming this is the intended location for the city of Raleigh, one has to wonder, why was it concealed with a patch? Tempting as it may
that's
be
my
to
question
envision
too.
some elaborate conspiracy, there is a very simple explanation. Remember how in 1608 John Smith sent his rough map of Virginia back to England?
Yes, sir.
Well, this is not the original map, but an illicit copy.
Mm-hmm.
A copy made in secret by the Spanish ambassador and covertly passed along to the King of Spain. So England had good reason to worry about sensitive information, such as the location of a fort, being intercepted by enemy spies. Another example is how the colony
That's
of
true, then
Roanoke was
that sucks for
concealed
us.
through omission. We still don't know the precise location or layout of the colony because it was never indicated on any of the surviving maps.
It was never
While it
mapped.
continues to be a source of aggravation among historians and archaeologists, this secrecy did serve a purpose as it prevented Spain from ever finding the colony. In fact, Spain continued to search for the colony long after it was lost, so it's unlikely they had anything to do with its disappearance.
Wow.
On the other
Not even
hand,
Spain
if the
couldn't
fort
figure it
was
out.
never built, the patch may be precisely what it was always assumed to be, nothing more than a correction. Then again, the near
see that, but I
invisible
mean,
symbol drawn on top of
It's
the
just
patch
hard to figure out what
strongly
happened
imply
because, you know,
concealment as
so
opposed
much
to
things
a
have happened
simple
throughout
addition.
time. Only John White could have figured it out if he was
After
really
going through
dedicated
all the available
to
evidence,
solving this mystery. He
this
just
is
gave
what
up
I'm
really
thinking.
easily,
So John
considering
White
his
left
daughter was
Roanoke in
lost.
1587. When he failed to return, the colony was split into two groups. One decamped for Site X, while the other went to live with the friendly Croatoans to await the
I
governor's
mean, that could be a
return.
possibility.
The region is known to have suffered a severe drought just after White left.
But that
The relocation
just
may not
increases
only have been
the
motivated
chances
by
that they were
diminishing
going to
supplies and
survive because they had less
but
numbers.
also by a lack of water and crop production.
Must have been
As
a
the
big
years
disagreement
turned
there.
into decades, the colonists may have started families with, and thus become inseparable from, the indigenous people amongst whom they lived. Not only would this explain the disappearance, but also the Croatoan inscription, the 50 miles into the main, as well as the grey eyes of the Hatteras. While I'm still leaning
can see
towards
that
it being
happening.
fake, I do find it
I
interesting.
mean, that's
how
like the best
Dare
possible
stone
ending they
was
could have had,
supposedly
but
discovered
we
just a
never
few
know.
miles north of Site X. After all, if you're a hoaxer and you want to convince 1930s America that this stone is genuine, why claim you found it so far away from Roanoke? One should also keep in mind that much of the evidence relies solely on the words and paintings of
That's all we
one
have, basically
man.
just a tree
Parts of
carved
White's
crow.
account could easily be a
John White could have done so
misinterpretation or
much, like I said,
exaggeration.
but no,
So depending
man.
on what
Just
evidence
had to
you
give up
regard as
easily.
credible, other solutions are equally plausible. For instance,
How is there
some
like
believe
no
the
movie
colony
about
went
this
ahead with the
situation?
original
It's
plan
pretty
and
interesting to
relocated
watch.
somewhere along the coast of Chesapeake Bay. Others believe they were all lost at sea after a failed attempt to return to England. But these solutions are about as helpful as saying the colony vanished into thin air. Without a more localized place of interest to search for corroborating evidence, there is virtually no hope of resolution. So, with all that being said, many questions remain. What happened to the 3 forsaken colonists and the 13 crewmen? Why did Simão Fernandes disobey orders and dump the colonists on Roanoke?
Why did he?
was
Yeah,
one
that's
of
a
the
good
2
point.
engravings left incomplete? Why was everyone named John? As for the most important question of them all, well, if there is an answer to that question, chances are it lies buried somewhere at Site X, just
Or at
waiting.
the sea near it. Jesus, man, this is. So that's the big mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke, and wow, there was just so much info in that video. Really, my point, I say the colonists either split it up like the video said in the end, like one went to the Chesapeake Bay or whatever, 50 miles away, and the other one went to some other place. It sucks that we don't have like evidence, even currently to today, that like there's no remains of people. We just have pure rumors how from the natives saying that how there's like weird people with native European features, like I don't know, like colored eyes and white hair. LEMMiNO claim that supposedly it was fairly common for natives, but I mean that's still new to me because I mean natives are always portrayed as like kind of reddish, dark haired, and I'm imagining brown or black eyed people, so that's weird to learn. Well, and what I do have to add on is that I wish John White didn't give up so easily. Like it just seems like, oh, like the anchor broke, like there's nothing we can do, like I would have checked the place out, like legit. That is so sus to me that I come back, from like this long war that England had. It didn't even allow me to return back to my daughter, and you just find a whole society. Well, I don't know, just structures. They tried. Abandoned, everything's looted, and there's like a tree stump with the words crow. And I don't know, I think as a father I'd be pretty terrified. Like I think like my daughter's dead or something. But I mean John White just concluded like they all went to Croatoan, so I mean that's a possibility too. But I mean the thing that just angers me that he didn't check, like why? Anyways, but I mean, hopefully, new info keeps coming up from this mystery. I mean, I really want to know what happened to it. Hopefully we can in our lifetimes, but I mean, who knows? Maybe like any evidence of whatever happened is now like buried deep underneath Earth, maybe even like underneath, the ocean. But anyways, I hope you all like this video. If you please do leave a like, comment, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel to help it grow, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.